The Moon Shadow Pack had stood for generations as one of the oldest and most respected werewolf packs in the Northern Territories. Unlike many packs that ruled through fear and endless battles, Moon Shadow had become a place where strength and kindness existed together. Its forests stretched farther than the eye could see. Ancient pine trees surrounded the village like loyal guardians, their branches whispering with every passing breeze. Crystal-clear rivers flowed through the valleys before disappearing into the mountains, and every full moon illuminated the land with a silver glow that the elders believed was the blessing of the moon goddess herself. Travelers often crossed dangerous territories just to witness the peaceful kingdom hidden within those forests. Some came seeking trade. Some came asking for protection. Others came simply because they had heard stories about the Alpha and his Luna. Their names were spoken with admiration everywhere. Alpha David, Luna Lisa. Many believed they had the strongest mate bond the moon goddess had blessed in generations. Children dreamed of growing up to become like them. Young couples hoped their own relationships would one day resemble theirs. Even neighboring alphas admitted that Moon Shadow's greatest strength wasn't its army. It was the love and trust shared by its rulers. Every morning before the sun rose above the mountains, David followed the same routine. Long before the rest of the village awakened, he walked alone through the forest. The guards offered to accompany him countless times. He always declined. He enjoyed those quiet moments. The silence gave him time to think. He greeted the ancient oak trees like old friends. He listened to the flowing river. Sometimes he simply stood beneath the morning sky, breathing the cool air before another busy day as Alpha began. Only one person knew exactly where to find him. She never interrupted his quiet walks. Instead, she quietly followed from a distance, carrying 2 wooden cups filled with hot herbal tea. When David finally stopped beside the river, she would smile and hand him one of the cups without saying a word. That had become their tradition. No servants, no guards, no royal ceremony. Just 2 people enjoying the sunrise together. This morning was no different. David smiled as he heard soft footsteps approaching behind him. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me," he said. Lisa laughed softly. "You always say that, and I always find you." She handed him one of the wooden cups. "The mint leaves are fresh." He accepted it with a grateful smile. "You picked them yourself? I know you can taste the difference." David took a sip before nodding. "You were right." She leaned against the wooden fence overlooking the river. The first rays of sunlight slowly appeared above the distant mountains, turning the water into liquid gold. For several peaceful minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply watched another day begin. Finally, Lisa broke the silence. "You didn't sleep well." David looked at her with surprise. "How did you know?" "You looked at the moon 3 times during the night." He smiled. "You noticed?" "I always notice." She gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Something is bothering you." David hesitated. There were many responsibilities that came with leading a pack. Disagreements between neighboring territories, food supplies for the coming winter, training new warriors, protecting hundreds of families who depended on him. Most days, he carried those burdens without complaint. But Lisa always seemed to know when one of those burdens had become heavier than the rest. He sighed. "Nothing serious." She smiled knowingly. "When you say nothing serious, it usually means you're trying to protect me from worrying." David looked away toward the forest. "I suppose you're right." Lisa stepped closer until she stood beside him. "You don't have to carry everything alone." He turned toward her. "You remind me every day." She reached for his hand. "And I'll keep reminding you." He squeezed her fingers gently. "I'm very lucky." Lisa laughed. "No, We're lucky. A pair of white birds suddenly flew across the river, disappearing into the trees. David watched them for a moment. I've always wondered something. What if the moon goddess offered us another life? He smiled. Would you still choose me? Lisa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the rising sun. I would search every forest, every mountain, every kingdom, and every lifetime, until I found you again. David couldn't help smiling. And if I looked different, I'd still know it was you. What if you couldn't recognize my face? Lisa placed one hand gently over his heart. I wouldn't need to. The breeze carried fallen leaves across the river. David wrapped one arm around her shoulders. Moments like these reminded him why he fought so hard for his people. Moonshadow wasn't simply his kingdom. It was his home. And Lisa, she was the heart of that home. Neither of them realized that before another moon had passed, everything they had just promised each other would be tested in ways they could never imagine. Far beyond the peaceful forests, high among the jagged peaks of the Blood Moon Mountains, something ancient stirred. Deep inside a forgotten cave, hidden beneath centuries of stone, a pair of glowing crimson eyes slowly opened. The creature inhaled once, then released a low growl that echoed through the mountain. Outside, the wind suddenly changed direction. Dark clouds gathered above the peaks. Animals fled deeper into the forests. Even the wolves stopped howling. The curse that had remained asleep for nearly 100 years had awakened once again. And it was already searching for its first victim. The peaceful morning slowly gave way to another busy day inside Moonshadow Pack. As the sun climbed higher above the towering pine trees, the village came alive with its familiar rhythm. Blacksmiths hammered glowing steel inside their workshops. Children chased one another between rows of wooden cottages. Young warriors practiced sword techniques in the central training arena, while experienced hunters prepared for another journey into the forest. Smoke rose gently from dozens of chimneys. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat drifted through the village. To anyone visiting for the first time, Moonshadow looked like paradise. Yet Alpha David understood something few outsiders ever realized. Peace was not something a ruler simply enjoyed. Peace had to be protected every single day. After finishing their morning walk, David and Lisa returned to the Alpha House together. Unlike many royal residences, the Alpha House was elegant without being extravagant. Its walls were built from polished oak logs, reinforced with gray stone, and large windows overlooked both the village and the surrounding forest. Inside, servants were already preparing breakfast. As David entered the dining hall, Beta Ethan stood waiting beside one of the windows. He bowed respectfully. "My Alpha." David smiled. "Ethan, you've been waiting long? I only arrived a few minutes ago." Lisa noticed the serious expression on Ethan's face. "What happened?" Glanced toward the servants. David immediately understood. "Leave us." Within seconds, everyone quietly exited the room. Only David, Lisa, and Ethan remained. The Beta unfolded a weathered map across the table. Our western patrol returned before dawn. David studied the map. "Anything unusual?" Ethan pointed toward a dense section of forest near the Blood Moon Mountains. "They found abandoned camps." "Hunters?" Ethan slowly shook his head. "No. There were no hunting tools, no cooking fires, no animal tracks." Lisa looked concerned. "So who was there?" Ethan's expression darkened. "We don't know. But," he reached into a leather pouch, "I found this." He placed a small piece of black cloth on the table. A strange silver symbol had been stitched into one corner. Lisa frowned. "I've never seen that crest." He picked it up carefully. The cloth felt unusually cold, almost unnaturally cold. "It doesn't belong to any neighboring pack." Ethan nodded. "That's what worries me." Breakfast ended quickly. David spent the next several hours meeting with village leaders. One farmer requested additional workers after wolves destroyed part of his crops. Another asked permission to expand the northern fields before winter arrived. David listened patiently to each concern. He never rushed anyone. That was one reason the people trusted him. He believed every voice deserved to be heard. Meanwhile, Lisa followed her usual routine. She visited the village healer first. Several elderly pack members needed medicine. Afterward, she stopped by the orphan house, carrying baskets filled with fruit and warm bread. The children rushed toward her the moment she entered. "Luna Lisa." She laughed as 3 little girls hugged her at once. "You've all grown stronger." One small boy proudly showed her a wooden sword. "Alpha David said one day I'll become a warrior." Lisa smiled. "Then you must practice every day." "I do." He puffed out his chest proudly. "I'll protect everyone." Lisa gently ruffled his hair. "I'm sure you will." Watching from the doorway, the caretaker smiled. "Our children always become happier after you visit." Lisa looked around the room. They deserve happiness. They've already lost enough. Late that afternoon, clouds slowly gathered above the mountains. The wind became colder. David stood on the western watchtower inspecting the distant forest through a brass telescope. Everything appeared normal. Birds still flew across the valley. Hunters returned with today's catch. Nothing seemed unusual, yet something deep inside him refused to settle. NBS? Yes. Double the night patrol. Ethan looked surprised. David nodded. "You sense something?" David nodded. "I can't explain it. But the forest feels different." Just before sunset, a loud horn suddenly echoed across the village. Every guard immediately looked toward the western gate. A lone horse raced toward the entrance. Its rider could barely remain in the saddle. The animal stumbled several times before finally reaching the village. David hurried down from the watchtower. The guards caught the exhausted rider before he collapsed. "My Alpha." The scout struggled to breathe. David knelt beside him. "Easy. What happened?" The young scout's face had turned pale. He swallowed hard. "There were wolves." David frowned. "Our hunters?" The scout slowly shook his head. "No, they weren't. Then, after." His voice trembled. Their eyes were red. Silence spread across the gathering crowd. The scout continued. "They attacked without making a sound. We couldn't smell them. They didn't behave like ordinary werewolves." Lisa slowly stepped forward. "Did anyone survive?" The scout lowered his head. "We lost 6 warriors." Gasps echoed around the square. Moonshadow rarely lost even one patrol. 6 experienced warriors disappearing in a single day was almost unimaginable. David helped the scout to his feet. "Take him to the healer." The guards quickly obeyed. That evening, the great council hall filled faster than anyone could remember. Every elder took their place around the ancient circular table. The pack's strongest warriors stood along the walls. Even retired alphas from allied territories had been invited. No one spoke. They simply waited. Finally, the oldest elder entered the hall, carrying a large wooden chest. Its iron locks were covered in dust. Elder Rowan placed the chest upon the table with great care. "I hoped this would never need to be opened again." David looked at the chest. "What is it?" "The oldest records of Moonshadow." Rowan slowly unlocked the first clasp, then the second. Finally, the heavy lid opened. Inside rested dozens of ancient scrolls. Some were so old They had begun to crumble. Others had been written long before the current kingdom even existed. Rowan carefully selected one sealed with black wax. This scroll was written 98 years ago. He broke the seal. Every eye in the room remained fixed upon him. His voice grew heavy as he began reading. To the Alpha who opens this, if these words have become necessary, then the blood moon curse has awakened once more. The room became completely silent. David slowly looked around the council chamber. Every elder wore the same frightened expression. Whatever was written inside that scroll was about to change the lives of everyone in Moonshadow forever. For several long moments, no one, inside the great council hall, moved. The only sound came from the crackling fire burning inside the large stone fireplace. Every warrior, every elder, every advisor waited for Elder Rowan to continue reading the ancient scroll. The old man adjusted the fragile parchment carefully before taking a slow breath. His voice echoed throughout the silent hall. The blood moon curse is unlike any sickness known to wolves. It cannot be defeated by ordinary medicine. It cannot be healed through strength. And it cannot be escaped by simply leaving the infected lands. David folded his arms. What exactly does it do? Rowan lowered the scroll. A curse attacks the mate bond. Lisa frowned. The mate bond? The elder nodded. It enters through one wolf, but feeds upon two. Confused whispers spread throughout the room. An elder sitting near the far end of the table quietly explained. When one mate becomes infected, the moon bond carries the curse into the other. Lisa slowly looked toward David. So, if one of us becomes cursed, the other becomes cursed too. Rowan answered quietly. Yes. The room became silent once more. General Marcus, commander of the Moonshadow Warriors, finally broke the silence. How long before the curse spreads? Rowan searched the old scroll again. It begins slowly. The infected wolf experiences nightmares, loss of strength, unexplained exhaustion, and eventually, his expression darkened. They begin losing control of their wolf. Several warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone understood how dangerous that could become. A werewolf unable to control their wolf form often became a danger to everyone around them. David leaned forward. The scout mentioned wolves with red eyes. Rowan nodded. Those were likely victims. Lisa whispered. They were still alive, but no longer themselves. The elder sadly lowered his head. Exactly. The meeting continued late into the evening. Every possible solution was discussed. Increase border patrols, close the trade routes, warn neighboring packs, send hunters deeper into the forest. None of them addressed the real problem. Finally, David asked the question everyone had been avoiding: the cure. Rowan slowly opened another scroll. There is one. Hope immediately returned to the room. The elder continued. It grows only once every 100 years. A flower. The silver moon blossom. David looked hopeful. Where? The highest peak of the Blood Moon Mountains. General Marcus frowned. That mountain is surrounded by cursed wolves. I know. How many warriors should we send? Rowan remained silent. Then, very quietly, he answered. Only one. The hall erupted into confusion. One? That's impossible. No warrior could survive alone. David simply watched the elder. There must be another reason. Rowan looked directly into his alpha's eyes. There is. The elder slowly unrolled the final section of the scroll. His hands trembled. I prayed you would never have to hear these words. Lisa's heart began racing. What words? Rowan spoke slowly. The silver moon blossom rejects anyone bound by a complete mate bond. Nobody understood. The elder continued. The flower can only be touched by someone whose mate bond has been severed. Silence. Complete silence. Lisa felt her breathing stop. David didn't move. He simply stared at the ancient scroll, as though hoping the words would somehow change. General Marcus finally spoke. "What do you mean, severed?" The elder swallowed hard. The Alpha would have to reject his mate. No one breathed. Not a single sound came from anywhere inside the great hall. David slowly turned toward Lisa. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Both understood exactly what those words meant. After the meeting finally ended, the entire village seemed strangely quiet. News hadn't reached the people yet. Children still played outside. Families gathered around evening fires. Musicians continued singing near the marketplace. Only those inside the council hall understood that everything was about to change. David walked alone toward the western cliffs overlooking the forest. He needed time to think. Several minutes later, Lisa found him standing exactly where she expected. He smiled sadly. "I wondered how long it would take." She stood beside him. "I'll always find you." The moon slowly rose above the mountains. Its silver light reflected across the endless forest. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lisa broke the silence. "You're thinking about the rejection." David looked down. "I don't want to." "I know. But you are." He nodded. She gently reached for his hand. "If rejecting me saves thousands of lives, then maybe it's worth considering." David immediately turned toward her. "No, I won't even think about it." Lisa looked surprised. "David, I mean it. My kingdom. My life. Then willingly reject you." Tears quietly gathered in Lisa's eyes. She smiled through them. "That's exactly why the people love you." David gently wiped away one tear rolling down her cheek. "I made a promise." "What promise?" "The day the moon goddess joined our souls." He looked directly into her eyes. "I promised I would never willingly let you face pain alone." Lisa rested her forehead against his. "We'll find another way." David whispered, "We have to." Neither of them noticed. High above the cliff, hidden among the trees, a cloaked stranger watched every moment. The figure slowly smiled beneath the hood. The Alpha refuses to reject her. Another cloaked figure appeared beside him. What now? The first figure quietly removed a small crystal from his pocket. Inside, dark crimson mist swirled like living smoke. "If he won't make the choice willingly," the stranger smiled coldly, "we'll force him." The crystal suddenly cracked. Far below, deep inside the moon shadow forest, several pairs of glowing crimson eyes slowly opened in the darkness. Then another, and another. Within minutes, dozens of cursed wolves began silently moving toward the borders of Moonshadow Pack. The peaceful kingdom had only one more night before the curse reached its gates. The night settled over Moonshadow Pack with an unusual silence. Normally, the forest echoed with the distant howls of wolves greeting the full moon. Tonight, nothing. Not a single howl. Not a single bird. Even the wind seemed afraid to move through the ancient pine trees. David stood on the highest watchtower, looking into the darkness beyond the borders of the pack. His instincts had never failed him. Something was coming. He simply didn't know when. Behind him, Beta Ethan climbed the wooden stairs, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You've been here since sunset." David accepted one of the cups. "I know. You should rest." David smiled faintly. "I'll sleep after this is over." Ethan leaned against the railing. "I've fought beside you for almost 15 years. David looked at him. "When you become this quiet, it usually means you've already made a decision." David didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. Ethan sighed. You can't be thinking about rejecting Lisa. David stared into the forest. I haven't decided anything, but you're considering it. David finally spoke. If protecting one person means risking thousands, what kind of alpha would I be? Ethan immediately replied, the kind your people already love. David lowered his head. And if those people begin dying because I refuse to act? Neither man spoke again. The question had no easy answer. At the Alpha House, Lisa couldn't sleep. She sat beside the bedroom window, watching the moonlight spill across the village. Every conversation from the council meeting replayed inside her mind. The flower rejects anyone with a complete mate bond. The alpha would have to reject his mate. She wrapped her arms around herself. For the first time since becoming Luna, she was afraid. Not of losing her position. Not of becoming an ordinary wolf again. She was afraid of losing the man who had never once broken a promise to her. A soft knock came at the door. Come in. The door slowly opened. It was Martha, the elderly woman Lisa had brought breakfast to only days before. She carried a small lantern in one hand and an old knitted blanket in the other. I saw your light was still on. Lisa smiled gently. I couldn't sleep. Martha placed the blanket around Lisa's shoulders. When I was young, she began softly, I used to think strength meant never crying. Lisa looked toward her. What changed your mind? Martha smiled. I watched your mother. Lisa's eyes widened. You knew my mother? Oh yes, she was one of the bravest Lunas this pack has ever known. Martha sat beside her. Do you know what she once told me? Lisa slowly shook her head. The strongest hearts are the ones that continue loving, even when fear tells them to stop. Lisa looked down at her hands. I don't know if I'm that strong. Martha gently squeezed her shoulder. You are. You just haven't discovered it yet. Just before dawn, the peace shattered. A loud horn blasted across the entire village. Then another. Then another. David was already running before the fourth horn sounded. To the western gate, warriors poured into the streets. Women hurried children into underground shelters. Guards climbed the walls. Archers took their positions. David reached the western gate just as a patrol staggered through the entrance. Only 4 warriors remained. Their armor was torn. Several were bleeding heavily. One collapsed the moment he crossed the gate. David caught him before he hit the ground. What happened? The young warriors struggled to breathe. They came. Out of nowhere. How many? The warrior looked terrified. I couldn't count. They weren't fighting like wolves. They fought like monsters. General Marcus rushed forward. My Alpha. David stood. Report. The western watchpost has fallen. What? It was completely destroyed. The words spread through the crowd like wildfire. Moonshadow's western watchpost had stood for nearly 70 years. No enemy had ever managed to destroy it. Until now. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from beyond the trees. Every warrior turned toward the forest. Another growl answered it. Then another. The sounds came from every direction. The tree line slowly began to move. Not because of the wind. Because dozens, no, hundreds, of wolves were emerging from the darkness. Their fur was black as midnight. Their eyes glowed an unnatural crimson. Foam dripped from their mouths. They moved with terrifying silence. David drew his sword. Hold the line. The massive wooden gates closed with a thunderous crash. Archers raised their bows. Every warrior tightened their grip on their weapons. Lisa climbed onto the wall beside David. You told me to stay inside, she said quietly. David gave a tired smile. Me. Period. As always. He couldn't help laughing. Huh, I should have known. Lisa looked toward the approaching wolves. We face this together. He nodded. Together. The bone dropped together. The first cursed wolf suddenly lunged from the forest. An arrow struck its shoulder. It barely slowed down. Another arrow pierced its chest. Still, it kept running. General Marcus frowned. Huh, they don't feel pain. David's eyes narrowed. Wait. The wolf reached the gate. Instead of attacking, it suddenly collapsed. Its entire body began shaking violently. Within seconds, dark smoke poured from its mouth. The creature let out one heartbreaking howl. Then, its eyes changed. Bearing the crimson glow disappeared. For one brief moment, its normal golden eyes returned. The wolf looked directly at David. There was fear in its eyes. Not hatred. Not rage. Fear. Then it died. David's grip tightened around his sword. They're victims, Lisa whispered. They're not our enemies. Before anyone could respond, a chilling voice echoed across the battlefield. Exactly. Every warrior looked toward the forest. A lone cloaked figure slowly stepped from the shadows. His face remained hidden beneath a dark hood. He clapped his hands slowly. Compassion, he said with a mocking laugh. That has always been your greatest weakness, Alpha David. David stepped forward. Who are you? The stranger smiled beneath the hood. The man who is about to force you to choose between your Luna and your entire pack. The stranger raised one hand. Behind him, hundreds more pairs of glowing crimson eyes opened in the darkness. The real battle had finally begun. The silence that followed the stranger's words felt heavier than the mountain itself. No one moved. No one dared lower their weapon. The only sounds came from the restless breathing of the cursed wolves waiting in the darkness. Their glowing crimson eyes surrounded the western gate like hundreds of burning embers. David stepped forward until he stood several feet ahead of his warriors. His sword remained pointed toward the ground, not because he feared the enemy, because he refused to strike first against wolves he believed were still innocent. The cloaked stranger noticed. A low laugh escaped beneath his hood. I expected nothing less, he muttered. David's voice was calm. You control them. They're your victims. The stranger slowly applauded, very observant. Lisa looked carefully at the wolves. Some growled. Some shook uncontrollably. Others seemed to struggle against an invisible force. One young wolf even whimpered softly before another wave of crimson light passed through his eyes, turning the fear back into rage. Lisa whispered, They're fighting it. David nodded. They're still inside. General Marcus frowned. My Alpha, if we hesitate, they'll break through the gate. I know. David never took his eyes off the stranger. What do you want? The stranger tilted his head. I've spent years preparing for this moment. I deserve at least a proper conversation. David's patience was fading. My people are waiting. Then I'll be brief. The stranger slowly pulled back his hood. Gasps echoed across the wall. He wasn't old, nor did he look like the monster everyone expected. His silver hair reached his shoulders. A long scar crossed the left side of his face. But his golden eyes, they carried years of bitterness. My name, he said quietly, is Victor. Elder Rowan's face immediately turned pale. It can't be. David looked toward him. You know him? Rowan's hands began trembling. I thought he died 20 years ago. Victor smiled. The old elder slowly stepped forward. When you were young, he said to David, Victor was one of the strongest warriors this pack had ever known. Several older warriors exchanged shocked glances. They remembered the name. He was supposed to become Alpha after your grandfather. David frowned. What happened? Victor answered before Rowan could speak. I loved someone. Lisa quietly looked toward him. My mate. Victor continued. She became infected by the blood moon curse. Silence filled the battlefield. I begged the council to let me search for the silver moon blossom. They refused. They said the journey was impossible. His voice grew colder. So I went anyway. What happened? David asked. Victor laughed bitterly. I found the flower. Hope briefly appeared on several faces. Then Victor continued. I returned too late. She died before I came home. The wind carried his words across the silent battlefield. I held her in my arms while the moon bond faded. He looked directly at David. Do you know what grief does to a wolf? David didn't answer. Victor raised both hands toward the sky. It destroys him. Lisa stepped closer. I'm sorry for your loss. Victor looked at her. For one brief second, his expression softened. Then it hardened again. Don't pity me. I don't need pity. I need justice. David frowned. What justice? Victor pointed toward Elder Rowan. The council chose tradition over love. They let my mate die. So I decided every Alpha after them would face the same choice. Realization slowly spread through the crowd. The curse, David whispered. You created it. No, I perfected it. The original curse almost disappeared. I gave it new life. Several warriors gripped their swords tighter. Rowan lowered his head in shame. We failed him. Victor laughed loudly. Now you finally admit it. David slowly sheathed his sword. General Marcus looked horrified. My Alpha! What are you doing? David ignored him. Instead, he walked several steps closer to Victor. I won't pretend the council made the right decision. Victor's smile faded. David continued. If they truly abandoned you, they failed. They failed as leaders. They failed as protectors. And they failed you. Victor stared at him in silence. David took another step. But these people, he pointed toward the frightened villagers gathered behind the walls, had nothing to do with that decision. The children hiding underground, the mothers protecting their families, the warriors standing beside me, they don't deserve your revenge. Victor's jaw tightened. They're paying for someone else's mistake. Exactly, David answered. So are the wolves you've cursed. Victor remained silent. For just a moment, his eyes lost some of their anger. Lisa noticed it immediately. She quietly whispered, Keep talking. David nodded. You loved your mate. Victor closed his eyes, more than life itself. So do I, David replied. And because I understand that pain, I refuse to let another innocent family suffer it. Victor slowly opened his eyes again. They will. Because you still haven't made your choice. The strange crystal hanging around Victor's neck suddenly began glowing crimson. Every cursed wolf immediately lifted its head toward the moon. Their growls grew louder. Their bodies began shaking violently. Victor smiled again. The curse is spreading, he said. He looked directly at David. By tomorrow night, the first families inside your village will become infected. Within 3 days, the entire pack. Lisa felt her heart sink. David asked quietly, How do I stop it? Victor answered without hesitation. You already know. The silver moon blossom, the blood moon mountains, and a broken mate bond. David looked toward Lisa. She met his eyes. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. For the first time, the impossible choice no longer felt distant. It had become real. Victor slowly stepped backward into the darkness. "I'll give you until tomorrow's sunset. If you reject your Luna, you may still save your people. If you don't," he smiled coldly, "Moon Shadow Pack dies." The crimson-eyed wolves slowly disappeared into the forest behind him. Within seconds, only silence remained. David stood frozen outside the western gate. Lisa quietly reached for his hand. He held it tightly, as though he feared letting go. Deep inside his heart, he already knew the decision that awaited him. And it was the one decision he had sworn he would never make. The journey back to the Alpha House felt longer than it ever had before. David walked in complete silence. Lisa remained beside him. Neither of them spoke. The entire village had noticed something was wrong. Warriors stood along every street with their weapons ready. Parents hurried their children indoors. Shopkeepers closed their stalls long before sunset. The usual laughter that filled Moon Shadow Pack had disappeared. Fear had settled over the kingdom like a heavy fog. When David and Lisa entered the Alpha House, the servants immediately bowed. David looked around the room. "Leave us. My Alpha, please." They understood. Within moments, the large house became completely quiet. The doors closed. Only David and Lisa remained. The fire inside the stone fireplace burned softly. Outside, rain began falling against the windows. Lisa slowly walked toward the fireplace before sitting in the chair beside it. David remained standing. His eyes never left the flames. Minutes passed. Finally, Lisa broke the silence. "You're thinking about accepting Victor's condition." David closed his eyes. "I don't know what I'm thinking anymore." Lisa stood and slowly walked toward him. "You've never looked this lost." He gave a weak smile. "I've faced stronger alphas. I've fought wars. I've buried friends. But I've never been asked to choose between the woman I love and everyone who depends on me." His voice cracked for the first time. Lisa gently reached for his hand. "You don't have to carry this alone." David looked at her. "But I do. I'm the Alpha. You're also my mate, and mates carry each other's burdens." David lowered his head. "I promised I would never hurt you." "I know, and I promised I would always stand beside you." She smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." Hours passed. Neither of them slept. They sat beside the fireplace talking about everything except the curse. They remembered the first day they met, the first hunt they shared, the first full moon after they became mates. David laughed quietly. "Do you remember when you challenged me to a race through the forest?" Lisa smiled. "You cheated." "I did not. You took the shortcut near the waterfall. I was being strategic. You were being dishonest." David laughed for the first time that day. "I still won. Only because you distracted me." "How?" You smiled. "And?" "I forgot I was supposed to be racing." Both of them laughed softly. For one brief moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. Then the laughter faded. Reality returned. Just before dawn, a loud knock echoed through the Alpha House. David opened the door. Beta Ethan stood outside. His face looked pale. "My Alpha, what happened?" "3 more villages have reported attacks." David's heart sank. "The curse?" Ethan nodded. "It isn't slowing down. It's spreading faster. And?" He hesitated. "We've lost contact with the Northern Patrol." David looked toward the gray morning sky. Time was running out. The emergency council gathered once again. Every elder looked exhausted. No one had slept. Maps covered the stone table. Reports arrived every few minutes. Each one brought worse news. General Marcus pointed toward the map. "The cursed wolves are surrounding us. They're not attacking. They're waiting." David frowned. For what? Elder Rowan answered quietly. For your decision. Silence filled the room. The oldest healer stepped forward carrying another ancient scroll. My Alpha. I searched through every record we possess. David looked up. And? There is no second cure. No hidden ritual. No forgotten remedy. The silver moon blossom is our only hope. David slowly looked around the chamber. Every face reflected the same heartbreaking truth. No one could save the pack. Not unless someone reached the flower. After the meeting, David climbed the tallest tower alone. The rain had finally stopped. Dark clouds drifted slowly across the morning sky. He could see the entire village from there. Children helping their parents carry water. Blacksmiths repairing broken armor. Young warriors strengthening the gates. None of them knew the impossible choice he faced. To them, he was simply their Alpha. The man who always found a way. David whispered to himself, there has to be another answer. But the wind offered none. Soft footsteps approached behind him. He didn't turn around. He already knew who it was. Lisa quietly stood beside him. She looked out over the village. They're beautiful. David nodded. They trust you. They trust us. Another long silence followed. Finally, Lisa spoke. If the positions were reversed, David looked at her. If I were the Alpha, and you were the one standing beside me. She smiled sadly. I would make the sacrifice. David immediately shook his head. You wouldn't. I would. She gently placed both hands in his. Because loving someone isn't always protecting them from pain. Sometimes, it's choosing the pain yourself so others can live. David's eyes filled with tears. I can't reject you. Lisa stepped closer until their foreheads touched. You won't be rejecting my heart. You'll only be breaking a bond. My heart will still know you. David whispered. What if the moon goddess never restores it? Lisa closed her eyes. Then I'll spend the rest of my life finding my way back to you. A tear rolled down David's cheek. He had faced swords without fear. He had faced rival alphas without hesitation. But standing before the woman he loved, he had never felt weaker. Lisa wiped away his tear. No matter what happens, she whispered, I have never regretted becoming your mate. David held her tightly, longer than ever before, far beyond the mountains. Victor watched the moon shadow pack from the top of a distant cliff. A cruel smile spread across his face. The Alpha's heart is breaking. He looked toward the Blood Moon Mountains. Good, because tomorrow he will finally do exactly what I wanted. The clouds slowly covered the sun, and as darkness crept over the kingdom once again, David realized that by the next sunset, his life, Lisa's life, and the future of Moonshadow Pack would never be the same again. The following morning, Moonshadow Pack awakened beneath a sky filled with dark gray clouds. No merchants called out to customers. Even the children, who usually filled the village with laughter, remained quietly beside their parents. Rumors had already spread. The warriors whispered among themselves. The elders avoided meeting each other's eyes. Something terrible was coming. No one knew exactly what, but everyone could feel it. Inside the Alpha House, David stood before the large window overlooking the village. He had not slept. The candles behind him had burned down completely. Maps still covered the table. Ancient scrolls remained open where he had left them hours earlier. None of them offered another answer. He closed his eyes. For the first time since becoming Alpha, he felt powerless. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. The door slowly opened. Beta Ethan stepped inside. My Alpha. David turned. You look exhausted. Ethan smiled sadly. So do you. Neither man laughed. Ethan walked closer, before placing a folded piece of paper on the table. "The village healer gave me this." David unfolded it. It contained the names of those who had already shown the first signs of the curse. 23 names. His heart sank. Yesterday there were only 6. Ethan nodded. "It spreads faster than we thought." David looked down at the list. Among the names were hunters, farmers, a blacksmith, an elderly widow, even a 16-year-old apprentice who had never left the village. None of them deserved this. He folded the paper slowly. "How many days?" "The healer believes 2. After that, they'll lose control." David clenched his fists. At the same time, Lisa quietly walked through the village alone. She greeted everyone she passed with the same warm smile she always wore. But today, the smiles didn't return. People simply bowed their heads. Some looked away. Others watched her with pity. An elderly woman finally stopped her. "My Luna." Lisa smiled gently. "Yes?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "They say," she hesitated, "they say Alpha David may have to reject you." Lisa remained silent. The woman quickly shook her head. "I don't believe it. Our Alpha would never hurt you." Lisa forced a smile. "Whatever happens, please don't lose faith in him." The woman looked confused. "What do you mean?" Lisa simply squeezed her hand gently before continuing down the road. Behind her, several villagers watched in silence. By midday, the emergency council met once again. Every elder had reached the same conclusion. There was no longer time to wait. Rowan slowly stood. "My Alpha, the curse is spreading exactly as the scroll predicted." David remained silent. "The silver moon blossom must be retrieved immediately. If we delay until tomorrow, we may lose half the pack." David finally spoke. "How long to reach the mountains?" 2 days. "And back?" "Another 2. David closed his eyes. 4 days. 4 days while the pack fought for survival. 4 days without Lisa. 4 days carrying a burden that might destroy both of them forever. After the meeting ended, David asked every elder to leave. Only Rowan remained. The old elder quietly approached him. "I know what you're about to do." David didn't answer. Rowan lowered his head. "I failed Victor once. I won't fail you." David looked toward him. "You think rejecting Lisa is the right choice?" Rowan's eyes became wet. "I think there are times when every choice breaks someone's heart." David whispered, "I promised her, and breaking that promise will break you." That evening, David asked the royal guards to ring the gathering bell. Its deep sound echoed throughout Moonshadow Pack. Every family left their homes. Warriors lined the central square. Children stood beside their parents. Nobody understood why the Alpha had called everyone together. Lisa slowly walked into the square wearing the silver ceremonial gown she always wore during important pack gatherings. She looked at David. He couldn't hold her gaze. Not for long. General Marcus stepped forward. "My Alpha, the pack is assembled." David nodded. His legs suddenly felt heavy. He had addressed his people hundreds of times. Never once had he struggled to speak. Tonight, every word felt impossible. He slowly stepped onto the stone platform in the center of the square. The crowd immediately became silent. David looked across the faces he had sworn to protect. Then, he looked at Lisa. She gave him the smallest smile, a smile that quietly said, David took one slow breath. "My people." His voice echoed across the square. For many years, the Moonshadow Pack has stood together through every hardship. The crowd listened carefully. "Today, we face our greatest trial." He explained the curse, the Blood Moon Mountains, the silver moon blossom, the impossible choice. No one interrupted. Many lowered their heads. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Finally, David turned completely toward Lisa. Time itself seemed to stop. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear his own voice. Lisa met his eyes. There was no anger, only love, only understanding. She gave him the smallest nod. David's hands trembled. Every instinct inside him screamed to stop, to forget the cure, to abandon the throne, to take Lisa and disappear into the forest forever. But then, he remembered the 23 names. The frightened children. The families depending on him. The promise he had made to protect them. He slowly closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice broke. Lisa. The entire square held its breath. The words he had feared more than death finally left his lips. Before the moon goddess, and before this entire pack, I reject you as my mate. The moment the words echoed across the village, a powerful wave of silver light burst between them. The mate bond shattered. Lisa gasped, as though someone had stolen the air from her lungs. David fell to one knee. Pain unlike anything he had ever experienced tore through his chest. The silver mark on both of their wrists slowly faded. Around them, the entire pack stood frozen in horror. No one spoke. No one cried out. Even the wind seemed to stop. David wanted to reach for Lisa. He wanted to tell her the truth, to hold her one last time. But he couldn't. If he did, he knew he would never leave for the blood. Moon, mountains. Lisa slowly wiped away a tear. Then, without saying a single word, she turned around and walked away. David remained kneeling in the center of the square, watching the woman he loved disappear into the crowd. His heart broke with every step she took, and for the first time in his life, Alpha David realized saving his people had just cost him everything. Not a single person moved. The entire village square remained frozen in silence. The words David had spoken still echoed in everyone's mind. I reject you as my mate. No one could believe they had heard them. Children looked up at their parents with confused expressions. The elders lowered their heads in sorrow. Even the strongest warriors struggled to hold back their emotions. For years, the people of Moonshadow Pack had looked at David and Lisa as the perfect example of love. Now, that bond had been broken before their very eyes. Lisa continued walking, slowly, calmly. She never looked back. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her chest burned where the mate bond had once lived. It felt as though a part of her soul had been torn away. Yet she refused to cry in front of the pack. She had stood beside David through every victory and every hardship. She would not allow her final moment as Luna to become one of weakness. As she passed through the crowd, the villagers instinctively stepped aside. No one spoke. No one stopped her. An elderly woman quietly reached out and touched Lisa's hand. My Luna. Lisa smiled faintly. Take care of everyone. The old woman burst into tears. You'll always be our Luna. Lisa's eyes filled with tears again, but she simply nodded and continued walking. Back in the square, David remained on one knee. His breathing was uneven. The pain in his chest had not faded. If anything, it had only deepened. Grown worse. General Marcus stepped forward. My Alpha. David slowly raised one hand. No. Leave me. Marcus hesitated. But, please. The general bowed his head and stepped back. One by one, the villagers quietly returned to their homes. Within minutes, the once crowded square became almost empty. Only Beta Ethan remained. He walked over and stood beside David. "I've never seen you like this." David stared at the ground. "I feel empty." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did what you believed would save them." David closed his eyes. "I know. But why does it feel like I've destroyed the only person who truly believed in me?" Night fell over Moonshadow Pack. The Alpha House, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt cold and silent. Lisa's favorite chair remained beside the fireplace. A book she had been reading still rested on the small wooden table. Her silver cloak hung by the front door. Everything reminded David of her. He slowly walked into their bedroom. The room was exactly as she had left it. The scent of lavender still lingered in the air. On the bedside table sat a small wooden wolf. Lisa had carved it for him on their first anniversary as mates. He picked it up carefully. On the bottom were tiny words carved by hand. "No matter where life takes us, you'll always be my home." David's hands began to shake. He sank onto the edge of the bed. For the first time since becoming Alpha, he cried. Not as a ruler, not as a warrior, but as a man who had just lost the love of his life. Meanwhile, Lisa packed only a small leather bag. She took no jewelry, no expensive gowns, no royal treasures, only simple clothes, a blanket, a water flask, and a small silver pendant David had given her years ago. She held the pendant tightly. "I should leave it behind," she whispered, but no matter how many times she tried, she couldn't bring herself to let it go. A gentle knock came at the door. "Come in." The door opened slowly. It was Martha, the elderly woman who had watched Lisa grow from a young she-wolf into the beloved Luna of the pack. Without saying a word, Martha walked over and embraced her tightly. For several moments, neither woman spoke. Finally, Martha whispered, "I know him." Lisa closed her eyes. "So do I." "He loves you. I know." "Then why?" Lisa slowly pulled away. "I don't know." "He didn't explain." Martha frowned. "That doesn't sound like David." Lisa looked toward the window. "No, it doesn't. But whatever reason he had, he believed he couldn't tell me." A tear rolled down her cheek, and somehow that hurts even more. Before dawn, the great wooden gates of Moonshadow Pack opened. Guards stood watch. They all lowered their heads respectfully as Lisa approached. One young guard wiped tears from his eyes. "My," he hesitated. "Lady Lisa." She smiled gently. "Take good care of the pack." "We will, and take care of your Alpha." The guard looked confused. "But," Lisa interrupted softly, "he'll need loyal people around him." She gave one final look at the village she had called home for so many years. Every memory came rushing back. The first day she entered the pack, her wedding beneath the full moon, the festivals, the laughter, the promises, and David. She whispered one final time, "Goodbye." Then she turned and walked into the forest alone. Far away, hidden among the cliffs overlooking the Blood Moon Mountains, Victor watched through a crystal mirror. The image showed Lisa disappearing into the forest while David prepared for his journey. Victor smiled with satisfaction. The first part of the plan is complete. A hooded follower stepped forward. "My lord, should we attack the Alpha now?" Victor shook his head. "No." He pointed toward the image of Lisa. "Follow her instead." The follower looked surprised. "The Luna?" Victor's smile widened. "David believes the hardest part was rejecting her." He laughed quietly. "He has no idea that Lisa has been the true target from the very beginning." The hooded warrior immediately disappeared into the darkness. Victor looked toward the rising sun. "Run while you can, Lisa. By the time David returns with the cure, you'll already belong to me." The first rays of sunlight slowly broke through the thick forest. A cool morning mist covered the narrow paths leading away from Moonshadow Pack. Lisa walked alone. She had no destination, no plan, only the determination to keep moving. Every few steps she instinctively reached toward the place on her wrist where the silver mate mark had once glowed. Now, there was nothing. The mark had vanished. Only smooth skin remained. She lowered her hand and continued walking. For the first time in many years, she truly felt alone. Behind her, Moonshadow Pack slowly disappeared behind the trees. She stopped for a moment and turned around. Only the tops of the watchtowers could still be seen above the forest. Memories flooded her mind. The day she first entered those gates. The day David welcomed her with a shy smile. The day the moon goddess joined their souls beneath the full moon. She smiled sadly. I never imagined that I would leave without saying goodbye. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. No, she whispered to herself. If he chose this, I'll respect it, even if she didn't understand it. Back at Moonshadow Pack, David stood before the massive wooden gates, wearing black traveling armor instead of his royal robes. His sword rested at his side. Across his back hung a leather pack filled with climbing ropes, dried food, herbs, and empty crystal bottles for carrying the silver moon blossoms safely home. General Marcus tightened the final strap on David's shoulder. The journey won't be easy. David nodded. I know. The Blood Moon Mountains have claimed many lives. I know. Marcus looked directly into his alpha's eyes. You don't have to make this journey alone. David shook his head. The scroll was clear. The flower rejects anyone whose mate bond still exists. Marcus sighed. Then let me at least send warriors to escort you to the mountain. David looked toward the distant peaks. If the cursed wolves see a large group, they'll attack before we ever reach the mountain. So you'll go alone? Yes. Marcus lowered his head. Then may the moon goddess walk beside you. Beta Ethan stepped forward carrying David's alpha cloak. Instead of placing it around his shoulders, he folded it neatly. You won't need this where you're going. David smiled faintly. When did you become so wise? Ethan laughed softly. When I became your friend. The two men embraced briefly. No words were needed. Both understood that David might never return. Inside the village, the people gathered silently along the main road. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They simply watched their alpha prepare to leave. A little girl stepped out from the crowd, holding a tiny wildflower. She couldn't have been older than 7. David knelt before her. Is this for me? She nodded. My mother says brave. People should never travel alone. David accepted the flower with a grateful smile. Thank you. The little girl hesitated. My alpha. Yes? When Luna Lisa comes home, will you smile again? David's heart nearly stopped. He forced a gentle smile. I hope so. The child smiled back before running to her mother. David tucked the flower carefully inside his travel pack. He knew he would carry it for the entire journey. Several hours later, Lisa reached the edge of a quiet lake, hidden deep within the forest. The water was perfectly still. She knelt to refill her water flask. As she looked into the reflection, she barely recognized herself. Her bright smile had disappeared. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. She looked tired, heartbroken. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Her hand immediately reached for the small hunting knife hidden beneath her cloak. Who's there? No answer. Only silence. Then another step. No one. The forest appeared empty. She frowned. I'm imagining things. She picked up her bag and continued walking. Hidden high above in the trees, 2 cloaked figures silently watched her leave. One whispered, Lord Victor was right. She came alone. The other smiled. This will be easier than expected. Meanwhile, David finally entered the Black Pine Forest, the first stage of his journey toward the Blood Moon Mountains. The deeper he traveled, the darker the forest became. Ancient trees blocked most of the sunlight. Strange claw marks covered several tree trunks. Broken weapons lay half-buried beneath fallen leaves, signs that many battles had been fought here. None had ended well. David stopped suddenly. His wolf senses detected movement. He slowly drew his sword. Several bushes rustled. 3 wolves stepped into the path. Their fur was gray. Their eyes were golden. Ordinary wolves. They stared at David for several long moments. Instead of attacking, they quietly lowered their heads, then disappeared into the forest. David frowned. They were warning me. The answer came seconds later. A terrifying roar echoed through the trees. Birds exploded into the sky. The ground itself seemed to shake. David turned toward the sound. Something enormous was moving through the forest. Branches snapped. Ancient trees bent. Another roar echoed. Much closer this time. David tightened his grip on his sword. Then, a massive black wolf burst from the trees. It was nearly twice the size of any werewolf David had ever seen. Its crimson eyes burned like fire. Dark smoke drifted from its body. Foam dripped from its jaws. The beast stared directly at David, then slowly smiled. A human smile. David's blood ran cold. This isn't an ordinary cursed wolf. The creature spoke in a deep voice. Unnatural voice. So, the famous Alpha David has finally arrived. David narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The monster took one slow step forward. I am the guardian of the Blood Moon Mountains, and if you wish to reach the Silver Moon Blossom, it bared its enormous teeth. You'll have to survive me first. The enormous black wolf stood motionless in the center of the narrow mountain path. Its glowing crimson eyes never left David. A cold wind swept through the forest. Dead leaves circled around them before settling once again. The creature slowly walked forward. Every step caused the ground beneath its massive paws to tremble. David tightened his grip on his sword. For years, he had fought rival alphas. He had defeated rogue wolves. He had protected his pack through countless battles. But never had he felt such overwhelming pressure from a single opponent. The beast stopped only a few feet away. You carry courage. Its deep voice echoed through the forest. But courage alone will not reach the mountain. I didn't come looking for a fight. The creature laughed. Everyone who enters these mountains says the same thing, and every one of them dies. David slowly lowered his sword. The beast frowned. Why aren't you attacking? David answered quietly. Because I don't believe you're my enemy. The giant wolf stared at him. Silence stretched between them. Finally, the beast spoke again. Interesting. Far away, Lisa continued her lonely journey through the eastern forest. She had walked since sunrise, with barely any rest. The forest around her grew thicker. The familiar paths had disappeared hours ago. Even so, she refused to turn back. If David wanted me gone, she whispered, I won't make this harder for him. She paused beside a small stream and knelt to drink. As she lifted the cool water to her lips, she noticed something floating downstream. A silver pendant. It was shaped like a crescent moon. The back of it carried strange markings she had never seen before. She frowned. This doesn't belong here. Suddenly, a frightened voice echoed through the trees. Help! Lisa stood immediately. Another cry followed. Please! Without hesitation, she ran toward the sound. Back in the Blood Moon Mountains, the guardian slowly circled David. You've come for the Silver Moon Blossom. Yes, To save your pack. Yes. By rejecting the woman you love. David froze. The guardian smiled. So, it is true. David frowned. How do you know that? The enormous wolf lifted its head toward the sky. These mountains hear everything. They remember every alpha, every Luna. David lowered his eyes. I never wanted to reject her. The guardian's expression softened ever so slightly. I know. David looked surprised. You know? The guardian nodded. I watched. The alpha stared in disbelief. You were there? I have watched every journey made toward these mountains for over 300 years. The creatures sat upon a large stone. Some came seeking power. Some came seeking revenge. Some came seeking immortality. It looked directly into David's eyes. You came seeking hope. The guardian suddenly asked, Tell me something. If obtaining the flower meant your own death, would you still continue? David answered without hesitation. Yes. The guardian narrowed its eyes. What if the flower could save only Lisa, but not your pack? David smiled sadly. I would still bring it back. And if it could save only your pack, but you lost Lisa forever? The question struck David like an arrow. He looked toward the distant mountains. Tears gathered in his eyes. I already lost her. His voice barely rose above a whisper. But if she lives, if my people live, then my pain is a price I'm willing to pay. The guardian stared at him for several long moments. Then, for the first time, it smiled. Not the cruel smile from before, a peaceful one. You have answered correctly. David frowned. Correctly? The guardian slowly stood. This was never a battle. It was a test. At that same moment, Lisa burst into a small clearing. She stopped immediately. A frightened little boy stood trapped beneath a fallen tree. He couldn't have been older than 10. His leg was pinned beneath a heavy branch. He looked terrified. Please. I can't move. Lisa rushed toward him. It's all right. I'm here. She knelt beside the fallen tree and examined the wound. His ankle was badly injured. You shouldn't have been alone. The boy looked down. I got lost. Lisa smiled gently. Then we'll find your family together. She pushed against the tree. It barely moved. She took a deep breath. Her wolf strength surged through her muscles. With one powerful effort, the heavy trunk rolled aside. The boy stared at her in amazement. You saved me. Lisa helped him stand. Can you walk? A little. She smiled. Then lean on me. Hidden behind the trees, 2 hooded followers of Victor watched everything. One whispered, She stopped to help a stranger. The other smiled coldly, exactly as Lord Victor predicted. High above the mountains, the guardian stepped aside. The path is now open. David looked toward the narrow trail leading upward. So you'll let me pass? I will. But remember this, Alpha. The greatest danger waiting ahead, it isn't the mountain. It isn't Victor. It isn't even the curse. David frowned. What is it? The guardian looked directly into his soul. The greatest danger is the guilt you still carry. David remained silent. The guardian continued. If you do not forgive yourself, not even the moon goddess can heal your heart. With those words, the ancient guardian disappeared into the mist, as mysteriously as it had appeared. David looked toward the towering peak where the silver moon blossom awaited. He tightened the straps on his pack, then began climbing higher into the Blood Moon Mountains. Far below, Victor stood on a distant cliff, watching through his crimson crystal. His smile slowly widened. Climb, Alpha David. Find the flower. Because while you're fighting the mountain, my hunters are closing in on Lisa. And when you return, you'll discover that saving your pack cost you the woman you love. David climbed higher into the Blood Moon Mountains. With every step, the air became colder. The trees grew fewer. Jagged rocks replaced the forest floor, and icy winds echoed between the cliffs like distant wolves howling beneath the moon. The guardian's words refused to leave his mind. The greatest danger is the guilt you still carry. David sighed. He had defeated countless enemies during his life, but this enemy lived inside his own heart. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lisa standing in the village square. Her smile, her tears, the moment the silver bond shattered between them. "I'll make this right," he whispered to himself. "No matter what it costs." He continued climbing. Lisa helped the injured boy walk through the forest. The child leaned heavily against her shoulder. "My name is Noah," he said quietly. Lisa smiled. "I'm Lisa. You don't look like the other wolves." She looked down at him. "What do you mean?" "You look—" He searched for the right words. "Sad." Lisa forced a small smile. "I've just had a difficult few days." Noah nodded. "My father says even the strongest wolves cry sometimes." Lisa looked at him in surprise. "Your father sounds very wise." "He is. He always tells me, never judge someone by the tears in their eyes. Sometimes they're carrying the weight of everyone else." Lisa's heart tightened. The words reminded her of David. Hidden among the trees, Victor's followers continued watching. One of them quietly asked, "Should we take her now?" His head. "No. Lord Victor wants her alive. And alone." We wait. Hours later, David finally reached the summit. The mountain peak stood above the clouds. The sky looked impossibly close. At the center of a circular stone altar, a single flower glowed beneath the pale afternoon light. Its silver petals shimmered as though woven from moonlight itself. The silver moon blossom. David stared in awe. So it really exists. He slowly approached. Each step caused the flower to glow brighter. The wind suddenly stopped. The mountain became completely silent. Just as David reached out, a soft female voice echoed around him. Only a heart willing to sacrifice everything may touch the blossom. David quickly looked around. No one stood nearby. "Who's there?" The voice returned. "Do you seek the flower for power?" "No." "For glory? For revenge?" David slowly shook his head. "I seek it to save my people." The flower glowed brighter. "And what of the woman whose heart you broke?" David closed his eyes. "I broke my own heart the same day. I never stopped loving her. I never will." A gentle silver light surrounded the blossom. Its petals slowly unfolded. David carefully reached forward. This time, nothing stopped him. The flower rested gently in his hands. The mountain itself seemed to exhale. He immediately placed the blossom inside the crystal container Elder Rowan had prepared. A warm silver light filled the bottle. He smiled for the first time in days. "I did it." At that very moment, a loud scream echoed through the forest below. "Lisa." David's smile vanished. His wolf instincts flared. Even from miles away, he recognized her voice. He looked toward the valley. Without another thought, he secured the crystal bottle inside his pack and began racing back down the mountain. Meanwhile, Lisa and Noah had reached a narrow stone bridge crossing a deep gorge. Suddenly, 3 hooded figures stepped onto the bridge. Another 2 appeared behind them. Their escape was cut off. Lisa immediately pushed Noah behind her. "Stay close." One of the hooded men laughed. "So, the former Luna finally stops running." Lisa narrowed her eyes. Who are you? We serve Lord Victor. What does he want with me? The man smiled. You. Only you. Lisa slowly drew the small hunting knife from her belt. You've come to the wrong woman. The man laughed louder. We know exactly who you are. He raised his sword. Take her alive. The attackers rushed forward. Lisa moved instantly. She sidestepped the first strike and kicked one attacker into the bridge railing. Another swung a sword. She ducked beneath it and struck his wrist with the handle of her knife. The weapon fell into the gorge. Noah watched in amazement. She's incredible. But there were too many enemies, one after another. They surrounded her. Lisa fought bravely, yet exhaustion from the broken mate bond had weakened her. A heavy blow struck her shoulder. She stumbled. Another attacker grabbed her arm. Before he could pull her away, a familiar roar shook the entire valley. Every hooded warrior froze. One whispered fearfully, "It can't be." Another answered, "He's here." A silver-gray wolf burst from the trees at incredible speed. He crashed into the attackers, sending two of them flying across the bridge. The remaining warriors quickly retreated. The wolf shifted back into human form. David. His breathing was heavy. His armor was torn from climbing the mountain. His eyes immediately found Lisa. Neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other. David had imagined this moment countless times. But now that she stood before him, words refused to come. Lisa broke the silence first. You came. David's voice trembled. I'll always come for you. The crystal bottle containing the silver moon blossom glowed softly inside his pack. But Victor, watching everything through his crimson crystal, simply smiled. The flower was only the beginning. The real game starts now. For several long moments, the world around them seemed to disappear. The wind, the forest, the frightened cries of Noah. None of it mattered. David and Lisa simply stood there, staring at one another. It had only been a few days since the rejection, yet it felt like a lifetime. David took one hesitant step forward. Lisa. Before he could say another word, she raised her hand. Don't. His heart sank. I know you came to help, and thank you. But don't say anything you can't take back. David lowered his eyes. There are things you deserve to know. Lisa shook her head gently. Not now. She looked toward the hooded warriors who were slowly regrouping at the other end of the bridge. We're still in danger. David nodded. You're right. The alpha inside him pushed his emotions aside. For now, there would be time for explanations, if they survived. The leader of Victor's followers stepped forward. His face was hidden beneath a black hood. He pointed his sword toward David. So, the Alpha has returned. David drew his sword. I've already lost enough. I'm not losing anyone else. The man laughed. You still don't understand. Our Lord never wanted the flower. David frowned. What do you mean? The hooded man spread his arms. The silver moon blossom was only meant to lure you away from Moon Shadow Pack. Lisa's eyes widened. Then, the pack, the man smiled, is completely defenseless. David's face turned pale. General Marcus, Beta Ethan, the elders, they were brave, but without their alpha, Victor had the perfect opportunity to strike. David immediately turned to Lisa. We have to go home. Before anyone could move, a deep horn echoed through the valley. Once, then twice, then a third time. The hooded warriors suddenly knelt. Victor slowly emerged from the mist. His long silver hair moved gently in the mountain wind. His golden eyes rested calmly on David. You climbed the mountain faster than I expected. David stepped in front of Lisa and Noah. Victor smiled. Still protecting everyone. You never change. Victor stopped several steps away. His expression was strangely calm. I heard every word you spoke to the Guardian. David frowned. You were watching. Of course. Victor slowly looked at the crystal bottle hanging from David's belt. So, you passed the Guardian's test. David tightened his grip on the bottle. You'll never have this. Victor laughed. I don't want it. David froze. You don't? Victor shook his head. The cure was never my goal. Lisa looked confused. Then why create the curse? Victor's smile slowly disappeared. Because I wanted every alpha after me to experience the same pain I did. He looked directly at David. And now you have. You rejected the woman you love. Walk away. You cried alone. His voice became quieter. Now you finally understand me. David answered softly. I understand your pain. But I will never understand your choice. Victor frowned. My choice? You lost the woman you loved. David nodded. I'm sorry for that. But instead of honoring her memory, you spread the same suffering to innocent families. You became the very thing that destroyed your own happiness. Those words struck Victor harder than any sword. For the first time, he had no answer. Suddenly, a young voice cried out, Lisa! Everyone turned. Noah had wandered toward the edge of the bridge. A loose plank snapped beneath his feet. The little boy slipped. His fingers barely caught the side of the bridge. He screamed. Without thinking, Lisa ran. So did David. Toes likely had guided their action. Victor instinctively moved as well. All three reached the edge at the same time. Noah looked up in terror. Please, don't let me fall. David grabbed the boy's right hand. Lisa held his left. The bridge creaked beneath their weight. Victor stood only a step away. He looked down at the frightened child. For one brief moment, he saw someone else. Not Noah, but the young son he had once dreamed of having with his own mate. The memory hit him like lightning. He remembered her smile, her laughter, the life they had planned together. A single tear rolled down Victor's face. Before anyone could react, he knelt beside David and grabbed Noah's arm. Pull! The three adults worked together. With one final effort, they lifted the boy safely back onto the bridge. Noah immediately threw his arms around Lisa. I thought I was going to die. Lisa hugged him tightly. It's all right. David slowly looked toward Victor. You saved him. Victor remained silent. He stared at his own hands. Hands that had caused so much suffering. Hands that had just saved a child. For the first time in 20 years, the hatred inside his heart began to crack. But before anyone could speak, a terrifying howl echoed from every direction. The ground shook violently. David turned toward the forest. Hundreds, no, thousands of cursed wolves poured from the trees. Their crimson eyes burned brighter than ever before. Victor's followers looked horrified. My lord, we've lost control of them. Victor's face changed instantly. What? The curse isn't obeying anyone anymore. David realized the truth. The curse has become stronger than its creator. The wolves no longer recognized friend or foe. They charged toward everyone. Victor, David, the hooded followers, even the frightened child. David raised his sword. Lisa stood beside him. Victor slowly drew his own blade. For the first time, the three of them stood shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies, but as wolves fighting for the survival of everyone. And far away, above the storm clouds, the full moon broke through. Its silver light poured across the battlefield, as if the moon goddess herself was watching what would happen next. The first cursed wolf reached the bridge with unbelievable speed. Its crimson eyes burned with madness. Dark smoke poured from its mouth as it leaped straight toward Noah. David reacted instantly. He stepped forward and swung his sword in a wide arc. The blade struck the wolf's shoulder, knocking it sideways before it could reach the frightened boy. "Run!" David shouted. "Take Noah and get behind the rocks." Lisa grabbed Noah's hand without hesitation. "Stay close to me." The little boy nodded, his face pale with fear. Together, they hurried toward a large stone outcrop a short distance from the bridge. More wolves poured from the forest. Dozens, then hundreds. Their howls echoed through the valley until the mountains themselves seemed to shake. General battles had prepared David for many things, but nothing could prepare anyone for an army that felt no fear and no pain. Victor looked at the advancing wolves with disbelief. "This isn't possible." One of his own followers ran toward him. "My lord, the cursed crystal has shattered." Victor's expression changed instantly. "What?" The man held out the broken crimson crystal. Dark mist leaked from the cracks. "It no longer answers to us." Victor stared at it in silence. The weapon he had spent years creating had turned against everyone, including him. A massive wolf lunged at Victor from behind. Before anyone else could react, David shoved Victor aside. The beast's claws tore across David's shoulder instead. Blood stained his armor. Lisa gasped. "David!" Ignoring the pain, he drove his sword into the ground in front of the wolf. A burst of silver energy erupted. From the blade, the creature stumbled backward, howling. Victor stared at David in shock. You saved me." David didn't even look at him. "I wasn't saving you. I was saving the man your mate once loved." Those words struck Victor harder than the wolf's attack. He slowly lowered his head. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed. Meanwhile, Lisa protected Noah behind the rocks. She looked around desperately for a way to help. Then she noticed something. Several of the cursed wolves hesitated whenever the moonlight touched them. Their movements slowed. Their eyes flickered between crimson and gold. She remembered Elder Rowan's words. "The curse attacks the bond. It doesn't destroy the soul." Lisa stood. "David," he turned while blocking another attack. "What?" "The wolves. The moonlight weakens the curse." David looked carefully. She was right. Whenever the silver light reached the creatures, their true eyes appeared for just a heartbeat. The victims were still inside. Victor heard the conversation. His eyes widened. "So that's why." He looked toward the broken crystal. "The curse feeds on darkness." He suddenly remembered something his mate had once told him. No darkness can survive forever beneath the moon goddess. Victor whispered, "I was blind." The battle continued to rage. Warriors from Moon Shadow Pack finally arrived, led by General Marcus and Beta Ethan. "My Alpha," Marcus shouted as he cut down two attacking wolves. "We came as fast as we could." David smiled with relief. "You held the pack?" Ethan nodded. "Barely, but everyone's alive." David's shoulders relaxed for the first time since leaving home. Victor slowly walked toward David. His sword fell from his hand. "I was wrong." David looked at him cautiously. Victor continued, "I thought making others suffer would silence my own pain. It never did. It only created more grief." Lisa stepped closer. "The woman you loved, would she have wanted this?" Victor closed his eyes. "No." A tear rolled down his face. "She would have hated the man I became." Without another word, Victor picked up the broken curse crystal. He looked toward the full moon, then toward David. "There is one way to end this." David frowned. "What are you talking about?" Victor smiled sadly. "The curse needs a master. If the master falls, the curse dies with him." Lisa's eyes widened. Before anyone could stop him, Victor raised the crystal high into the air. The remaining dark energy rushed back into his body. Every cursed wolf froze. Victor screamed in agony. Dark smoke surrounded him. David took a step forward. "No!" Victor looked at him one final time. "Take care of your people, and never waste another day with the woman you love." With all his remaining strength, he slammed the crystal against the rocks. It shattered into thousands of pieces. A brilliant silver light exploded across the valley. Every cursed wolf collapsed. The crimson glow vanished from their eyes. One after another, they slowly stood, confused, free. The curse was finally broken. Victor smiled peacefully, then quietly fell to the ground. The wind carried away the last traces of dark mist. For the first time in 20 years, the valley was silent. David slowly approached Victor. The former warrior looked toward the moon with peaceful eyes. "I can finally see her again." Those were his last words. His eyes closed. The mountains became still. Lisa lowered her head respectfully. No one should have suffered the way he did. David nodded, but he made sure no one else ever would again. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, David reached into his pack and removed the crystal bottle. The silver moon blossom still glowed brightly. He smiled at Lisa. "We should go home." She looked at him. For the first time since the rejection, there was hope in both of their eyes. Moonshadow Pack was waiting, but neither of them knew the greatest miracle of all was still waiting beneath the light of the moon goddess. The journey back to Moonshadow Pack was quiet. The danger had passed. The curse was gone. Yet neither David nor Lisa knew what awaited them at home. They walked side by side. Sometimes their hands almost touched, but each time they hesitated. The broken mate bond still stood between them like an invisible wall. Little Noah walked a few steps ahead, humming happily. Every so often, he looked back at David and Lisa. He frowned. "They're supposed to walk together." Lisa smiled softly. "We are walking together." "No." The boy shook his head. "I mean like before." David and Lisa exchanged a brief glance. Neither of them replied. By sunset, the gates of Moonshadow Pack came into view. The guards on the watchtower spotted them first. "It's the Alpha and Lady Lisa. They're back." The great horn echoed across the entire kingdom. Within moments, the village square filled with people. Warriors, children, elders, merchants. Everyone ran toward the gates. General Marcus was the first to reach David. He smiled broadly. "You came home," he said. David embraced him. "We all did," he said. Data Ethan looked toward the crystal bottle. "The flower," he murmured. David nodded. "We have it," he said. Cheers erupted throughout the village. Many people cried openly. Others dropped to their knees, thanking the moon goddess. Inside the great hall, Elder Rowan carefully accepted the silver moon blossom. He placed it into a silver bowl filled with sacred spring water. The flower slowly dissolved. Its silver light spread through the water until it shimmered like liquid moonlight. "This is enough," the elder whispered, "for every infected member of the pack." Throughout the night, the healers worked without rest. One by one, every cursed wolf drank the remedy. The crimson veins faded. Their strength returned. Families embraced. Children laughed again. The nightmare that had haunted Moonshadow Pack was finally over. David stood before the entire pack in the village square. This time, he wore neither armor nor his royal cloak, only simple black clothing. He wanted to stand before his people, not as an alpha, but as a man. Thousands of wolves gathered silently. David took a deep breath. "My people, there is something I should have told you before." He looked toward Lisa. She stood quietly near the front of the crowd. "I rejected Lisa, not because I stopped loving her." His voice trembled. "I rejected her because the ancient scrolls declared it was the only way I could reach the silver moon blossom." Gasps spread through the crowd. David continued, "Every word I spoke that day felt like a blade through my own heart." He slowly turned toward Lisa. "I asked the woman I loved to carry a burden she never deserved. I left her to face heartbreak alone." He lowered himself onto one knee before the entire kingdom. Complete silence fell, filled with tears. "I cannot erase the pain I caused. I cannot return the days you spent believing you had been abandoned. But before the moon goddess, and before every soul gathered here, I ask for your forgiveness, not as your alpha, but as the man who has loved only you." Tears streamed down Lisa's face. The entire village watched in silence. She slowly walked toward him. Every step brought back memories. The day they met, their first dance beneath the full moon, the promise they had made by the river, the heartbreak in the village square. She stopped in front of David. "You should have trusted me." David nodded. "I know. We were supposed to carry every burden together. I know. You broke my heart." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I know." Lisa looked into his eyes for several long moments. Then, she smiled through her tears. "And yet, my foolish heart never stopped loving you." David looked up in disbelief. "Lisa," she gently took his hands, "I forgive you." The crowd erupted into joyful applause. Children cheered. Warriors raised their swords. Even Elder Rowan wiped tears from his eyes. At that exact moment, the full moon appeared in the bright afternoon sky. A soft silver light descended from the heavens. Everyone looked upward. The light surrounded David and Lisa. The faded marks on their wrists began glowing once more. Lisa gasped. David stared in amazement. The silver light wrapped around their joined hands. A warm voice echoed across the village. Not loud, not frightening, but filled with peace. "True love that chooses sacrifice over selfishness and forgiveness over hatred shall never remain broken." The silver marks reappeared on both of their wrists, brighter than ever before. The mate bond had been restored. The moon goddess herself had answered. David pulled Lisa into his arms. This time, he refused to let go. The entire village celebrated around them. Weeks later, Moonshadow Pack had become peaceful once again. The damaged watchtowers were rebuilt. The forests echoed with laughter instead of fear. The wolves who had been freed from the curse chose to remain with the pack, helping rebuild everything that had been lost. Near the river, where David and Lisa had always shared their morning tea, a simple stone monument was placed. Upon it were carved the words, "Pain can create monsters, but love can still bring them home." Beside the monument stood another inscription, "In memory of Victor and the mate he never stopped loving." David visited it often, not to remember an enemy, but to remember what hatred could become when grief was left to grow alone. One peaceful sunrise, David and Lisa stood together on the same riverbank where the story had begun. David handed her a wooden cup of hot herbal tea. Lisa laughed. "You remembered. I always will." They watched the sunrise in comfortable silence. Finally, David smiled. "If the moon goddess gave us another life, Lisa looked at him with sparkling eyes. I'd still find you. David laughed. Even if I got lost? You always do. She slipped her hand into his. So I'd simply come looking for you again. The morning breeze carried their laughter across the river. The people of Moon Shadow Pack would later tell the story. For generations. Not as the tale of an alpha who rejected his Luna, but as the story of two hearts that proved love is strongest when it chooses sacrifice, truth, and forgiveness. And from that day forward, Alpha David and Luna Lisa ruled Moon Shadow Pack with even greater wisdom. Never again would they carry their burdens alone, because they had learned the greatest lesson of all. A true mate bond is not measured by destiny alone, but by the courage to fight for each other, even after the heart has been broken. Kindly subscribe so you never miss our daily love stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Stay tuned, and keep spreading love.